Now we're going to compare and contrast fusion and fission. So first, let's talk about nuclear stability. It's called nuclear radiation because it depends on the stability of the nucleus. And this is all about the proton-neutron ratio inside of the nucleus. So carbon-12 has 6 protons and 6 neutrons. So because those are relatively equal, that makes it a stable atom. As opposed to carbon-14 has 6 protons versus 8 neutrons. And since that's an unequal number of neutrons and protons, it's more unstable. The more unequal the proton-neutron numbers are, the more likely the isotope is going to be radioactive. So uranium-238 has 92 protons versus 146 neutrons. So since those numbers are so far apart, uranium-238 is very radioactive or very unstable. So half-life is the amount of time for half of a radioisotope in a sample to decay. So it's going to become stable by giving off alpha, beta, and gamma radiation. And so here I have 100% unstable radioactive substance, and then the half-life is the time it takes for half of this to become stable. So at 100%, half of that is 50%, and so the time it took for 50% of it to become stable is this time down here, which is 1, where 1 half-life is equal to 5.27 years. And so half of 50 is 25, and so 2 half-lives will have occurred at that point, and so that would be 5.27 years plus 5.27 more years. So if we look at the example in the box, if you start with 10 grams of a substance that has a half-life of 5.27 years, how much will be left after 15.81 years? So first we can take a calculator and divide the total time, 15.81, divided by the half-life time, 5.27, and we can see that it's going to cut in half 3 times. And so I'll take now my mass, 10 grams, and it's going to divide by 2 once, twice, and then 3 times, and so 1.25 grams is how much I have left that is still radioactive after 15.81 years. So here, what is the half-life of element X? So here we're at 100, and then when we get down to 50, how much time has occurred? And so we'll look at the bottom here, the time between this point and this point is 1.3, and that's billion years, which is a lot of time. How much of element X remains unstable after 2 half-lives occur? So this is the first half-life, and then to go half of 50 is 25, so this would be our second half-life, and that means a total time of 2.6 billion years would have passed. We can also look at the data table over here. When we go from 100 to half of that, 50, then the time that has elapsed is 1.3 billion years, and then when we go half of that, then a total of 2.6 billion years has gone by. Transuranium elements, elements larger than atomic number 92, bigger than uranium, are all radioactive. They have too many protons and neutrons in their nucleus to be stable. Because of this, they break apart or decay. Fusion and fission. Fission is when a neutron hits a large nucleus and causes it to break apart. It fizzes apart. Also, I like to think fission is division. In a nuclear reactor, you want fission to take place. It must, however, take place at a safe rate to prevent a chain reaction. So in this diagram, we can see the bombardment with a neutron of this heavy uranium atom, and then notice it divides or breaks apart. Fission is division. It fizzes out, it breaks apart, and then that gives off even more neutrons, which hit other really large atoms, and then that causes them to break apart. And so this is a chain reaction. Examples of uncontrolled fission leading to a chain reaction are atomic bonds and Chernobyl. So here is a diagram of the bombardment of a very heavy radioactive isotope and the division or fission occurring. And then you see more neutrons flying away, which will then hit other heavy atoms and cause them to divide or undergo fission as well. Here's what a chain reaction would look like, where we have just fission occurring everywhere and then causing more fission and then more fission, which is a chain reaction. Fusion is when 2 small nuclei join together or they fuse together, they combine. Fusion is what powers the sun. hydrogen nuclei, protons, join together and make helium nuclei. So 1 proton plus 1 proton equals 2 protons, which is a helium. Fusion releases more energy than fission reactions. Fusion, however, can only take place at a very high temperature, 40 million degrees Celsius. So up here, the sun is a gigantic ball of hydrogen. Inside the sun, the hydrogen atoms are heated so much they turn into a plasma state where electrons no longer orbit the protons in the atom's nuclei. The freed nuclei then fuse to form helium atoms and neutrons, and this fusion process unleashes vast bursts of energy. So here's another example of fusion occurring with a tritium and a deuterium, or 2 different hydrogen nuclei, and then afterwards they form a helium. Look at the diagrams and identify, is it fusion or is it fission? Here we have a neutron bombarding into a uranium, and it is dividing or fizzing out, breaking apart. This is fission. Okay, if we look down here, we have 2 hydrogen atoms there, and then they fuse together to make this helium atom, and then energy is released as well. So this is fusion. Some uses of radiation. It's not always a bad thing. There are beneficial uses for radiation. Radioisotopes can be used to save lives, cancer treatment. Radiation can be used to sterilize, and it's a source of energy, like in power plants. We also have radiation in our smoke detectors, and it can also be used as tracers in our body to help find bad cells within our body. So now you're going to do an activity on Canvas where you categorize this information in fusion versus fission, and then answer some questions.